Good evening and welcome. This is Spotlight Africa, brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio. I am Uyai Aniekan. Today on Spotlight Africa, South Sudan leader sacks police chief after coup rumors. Ghana's President Akufo-Addo in fresh push for reparations. President Ramaphosa says South Africa has referred Israel to ICC. United Kingdom Supreme Court rules Rwanda asylum policy unlawful. Plus, Zimbabwe's handbag gold smuggler fined $5,000. These stories are all just ahead on Spotlight Africa. To stay with us. Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin today's Spotlight Africa from South Sudan, where President Salva Kiir has fired the police chief as part of a move against security officials following reports of an attempted coup. Leading security figures downplayed the coup rumors that emerged over the weekend when Kiir was on an official visit to Riyadh for a summit. A day later, local media reported that 27 military and intelligence officials had been arrested. Next year, South Sudan is due to hold its first election since it gained independence in 2011. Recall that a 5-year civil war ended in a peace deal in 2018, but the agreement is yet to be fully implemented and the country remains fragile. In another development, Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo has urged African and Caribbean leaders to unite in demanding reparations from historical injustices committed during slavery and colonialism, terming the action a valid demand for justice. He said that Africa was owed reparations by countries that participated in slavery, as the practice had stifled Africa's progress. Akufo-Addo said this at an ongoing reparations conference in Ghana's capital, Accra, and attended by leaders from African and Caribbean nations. Reports say the conference seeks to build a united front and formulate a plan to guide African countries and the diaspora in pursuing reparations. Meanwhile, Akufo-Addo has been vocal in pushing for apologies and reparations from countries that participated in slavery and colonialism. Away from that, South Africa has referred Israel's government to the International Criminal Court (ICC) over its actions in the Gaza conflict. President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Wednesday he did not disclose the other countries involved in referring Israel to the ICC. He added that they did not condone Hamas's earlier attack on Israel, but were opposed to Israel's ongoing actions, which they believe warrant investigations by the ICC. Israel has argued that its bombing and invasion of Gaza are acts of self-defense following the 7 October Hamas attack on Israel, in which more than 1,400 people died and more than 230 people were taken hostage. It also says that Hamas is using civilian buildings such as hospitals as cover for its fighters and weapons, making them legitimate targets. The ICC is an international court that investigates and tries individuals accused of committing grave crimes of concern to the global community, such as war crimes or genocide. South Africa has been one of the most vocal supporters of Palestinians in the ongoing conflict with Israel. Several of the country's leaders have publicly supported the Palestinians, and there have also been pro-Palestine demonstrations. Meanwhile, South Africa's national rugby union star Nietzsche, commonly known as Orgs, has received the highest honor from the Balongo Busilika traditional community. Queen Coxie Kabuligwe Moroka was bestowed the honor on Nche during a homecoming ceremony held on Wednesday, weeks after his team won a historic fourth World Cup title for South Africa. Fans say Nche's contributions were instrumental in propelling the Springboks to victory, particularly in the semi-final. According to a statement, Queen Moroka gave him the title of Totlio Yamorofe Webalong Buleselaka, which translates to honor of the nation and is given to esteemed individuals who stand out for exceptional achievements and have served the nation and interests of the country. Nche is the first recipient of the award. In a separate development, United States has said that it will resume deliveries of food aid across Ethiopia in December, 6 months after they were suspended over corruption allegations. The U.S. International Development Agency, USAID, said significant reforms would ensure that the food supplies reach those who needed them the most. It said the aid resumption will be on a one-year trial basis. According to reports, millions of Ethiopians face food shortages because of the effects of conflict and severe weather. In the meantime, United Nations has said it will resume delivering humanitarian supplies and evacuating staff in Niger after the country's ruling junta lifted domestic flight restrictions. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, said the resumption of domestic flight operations will facilitate the monthly delivery of nearly 2.4 metric tons of medical supplies and other aid, as well as critical medical and security evacuations for humanitarian staff. The UN agency, however, added that it expects challenges fueling its aircraft. Elsewhere, the United Nations Security Council has extended the mandate for another 12 months of the UN peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic known as MINUSCA. Reports say 14 of the 15 council members voted on Wednesday to renew the mission, asking it to continue advancing reconciliation and durable peace through political, security and institutional means. MINUSCA was also urged to protect human rights and assist in preparations for local elections in 2024 and 2025. Russia abstained from the vote after its representative said the resolution to extend the mandate contained some elements which did not reflect the current situation in the country. Moscow maintains close ties with the CAR and the influence of people believed to be from the Wagner mercenary group, imperceptible in the government fight against local rebels. Meanwhile, the Russian and Central African forces have been accused of atrocities and human rights violations in the operations. The United Nations has maintained its peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic since 2014. A year after a civil war plunged the country into political instability. In another development, United Kingdom Supreme Court has rejected a controversial government plan to send migrants to Rwanda and upheld a lower court ruling that it was unlawful and a major setback for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. A 5-judge panel at the UK's highest court unanimously sided with Court of Appeal judges that the policy was incompatible with Britain's obligations under international treaties. The judges agreed with the lower court's June verdict that Rwanda risked forcibly returning asylum seekers and refugees to a country where they could face persecution in a move known as refoulement. In a related development, the row over the Rwanda plan is a reminder of two fundamentals. Firstly, the geography of power in the democracy. Across Parliament Square from the Commons and the Lords stands the Supreme Court. The power of the lawmakers on one side of the grass, the power of the rule of law on the other. Secondly, the contemporary challenge of richer countries globally of illegal migration. We move now to Uganda, where Parliament has passed a bill allowing the state-owned oil company Uganda National Oil Company UNOC to source and supply oil to the domestic market, If approved by President Yoweri Museveni, the bill will end the country's decades-long practice of relying on Kenyan companies for oil imports. Members of Parliament who supported the bill said it would reduce fuel costs by cutting out middlemen and fuel cartels that arbitrarily influence fuel pricing. Uganda's Energy Minister Ruth Nkebwiwa recently said that the country needed to stop importing oil through Kenyan companies as it exposed Uganda to occasional supply vulnerabilities where Ugandan oil marketing companies were considered secondary whenever there were supply disruptions. Away from that, Kenya's parliament has approved the sending of 1,000 police officers to Haiti to help quell gang violence despite a court order that has barred the deployment pending the hearing of a case. Members of Parliament supporting the motion said the country was part of the global community and could not ignore when other countries were in need. They also argue that Kenya has a history of peacekeeping missions, such as in Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Sierra Leone. Those opposed said the country is facing its own security challenges and cannot afford to spare any of its officers. The approval was passed in a voice note moments before the start of a High Court session, which was hearing a case challenging the mission. The court had earlier blocked the deployment, saying the petitioners had raised issues of national importance. Charles Midega, the lawyer of one of the main petitioners, told newsmen that it was a brazen act by Parliament to discuss the deployment despite an order in place. He added that he would raise it with the judge. Malawi suspends all government foreign trips. Stay tuned for details of this and more after this time out.
Brilliant broadcast and entertainment, sports on the go, and news around the world. Watch Spectrum TV on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and free-to-air frequency 12733. Visit our website, spectrumtvlive.ng. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Thanks for staying tuned in. Now to the rest of the news stories on Spotlight Africa. Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera has suspended with immediate effect all international travel involving himself and all government officials. He has also ordered all ministers currently outside the country to return home. Speaking in a televised address on Wednesday night, he also announced restrictions on local travel and a reduction by half of the fuel allocation to cabinet ministers and senior government officials. The measures will be in place until the end of the financial year next year, March. Some similar austerity measures were also announced during the COVID pandemic but had limited impact as they were not strictly enforced. Meanwhile, the president asked the Minister of Finance to make provisions for a reasonable wage increase for all civil servants in the next budget review. He also directed a reduction of income tax in the new budget so as to help workers whose pay has lost value as a result of inflation. The president's move comes as the International Monetary Fund (IMF) approved a 4-year credit facility for Malawi worth $174 million just days after the country devalued its local currency. To Liberia now, where initial results from the presidential runoff election points to an extremely tight race. With almost a quarter of the results in, President George Weah has 49% of the votes, just behind the opposition's Joseph Boakai, who has over 50%. In the first round, both men were also neck and neck, with the third-placed candidate securing just 2% of the votes. Neither President Weah nor Boakai achieved more than 50% of the vote in the first round of the election, triggering the runoff. The same two candidates also faced each other in the 2017 election, which ended in a runoff comfortably won by President Weah. The final runoff results are expected to be released within 15 days of the 14 November polling date. Liberia is still struggling with the long-term impact of civil wars and the economic fallout from the 2014 to 2016 Ebola outbreak, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. In a separate development, 2 journalists in total have been sent to prison for defaming the government minister on social media. Newspaper editor Lloyd Lawson and freelance reporter Anani Soso had accused the housing minister of failing to disclose the full details of a burglary at his home. They said the politician reported the crime to the police but did not declare that more than $600,000 in cash was stolen. He subsequently took legal action against them. Meanwhile, the media watchdog Reporters Without Borders has called for the pair's immediate release. In Nigeria, a row has emerged over Saudi Arabia's repatriation of 177 Nigerians on Monday, shortly after their arrival at the airport in Jeddah. Saudi authorities reportedly abruptly revoked the Nigerians' visas mid-flight for unknown reasons, but cleared the 87 others on the 264-passenger Air Peace flight. Saudi Arabia's embassy in Nigeria on Wednesday said that the repatriated passengers did not fulfill the entry conditions and submitted incorrect information to obtain a category of visa that doesn't apply to them, which was discovered upon their arrival. But Air Peace has disputed Saudi Arabia's statement, saying on Wednesday that the visas of all passengers were vetted to be valid using Saudi Arabia's verification systems before check-in. The airline added that it had sent the passenger manifest to Saudi authorities before departure, but they did not cancel any visa or raise any concerns at the time. Meanwhile, Nigeria's 2 biggest workers' unions have suspended a nationwide strike after reaching a deal with the federal government. The Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) and the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria (TUC) began the stay away, which was described as indefinite, on Tuesday over unpaid salary arrears of workers in Imo State and a recent assault of NLC President Joe Ajaero. The union said in a joint statement on X that the government had apologized and promised to investigate the incident. Meanwhile, the unions are still at loggerheads with the government over the rising cost of living and hike in fuel prices caused by the removal of the fuel subsidy. The 2-day strike saw ports in Lagos State shut, schools schedule disrupted, and railway travel cancelled. Away from that, an overnight curfew has been imposed in Madagascar's capital ahead of Thursday's presidential election, which most opposition candidates have described as a fraud and are boycotting. The country has been extremely tense, with numerous opposition protests being dispersed by police. Meanwhile, the capital police chief said the curfew was necessary after what he called acts of sabotage, including the burning of a polling station. President Andrei Rajoelina is running for re-election, but 10 of the 12 opposition candidates have urged supporters not to vote, raising concerns about the credibility of the poll. Elsewhere, following Somalia's worst floods in a century, gushing waters have swept through a cemetery in the central city of Grokayo, leaving bodies floating through the streets. The gruesome sight has haunted residents like Ayan Mohammed, who lives near the graveyard. With houses partially submerged and human remains floating nearby, the fear an outbreak of disease, reports say some of the bodies were recognizable, further traumatizing people, and as the water has subsided, unearthed bones have also been found. Lastly, on Spotlight Africa, a court in Zimbabwe has ordered a prominent businesswoman to pay a fine of $5,000 for trying to smuggle gold worth more than $330,000 out of the country in her handbag. Henrietta Rushawaya, the president of the Zimbabwe Miners Federation, was also given a suspended 18-month sentence. In the traditions of the Shona ethnic group, she's considered a niece of President Emerson Mnangagwa, but they are not related by blood. Rushawaya, a strong supporter of the ruling party, was caught with gold bars weighing 6 kg at the main international airport in the capital Harare. In 2020, as she was about to fly to the United Arab Emirates, she did not have an export permit. At the time, she said she had accidentally picked up the wrong handbag. The gold has been forfeited to the state. And that's all we have for you today on Spotlight Africa, bringing you news all around the continent. This is brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio. Do well to follow us across all social media platforms, all of which you can find at SpectrumTv Live. You can also follow us on Planet Radio at planetradio.ng. I am Uyai Aneka, and thanks for being a part of this, and do enjoy the rest of your evening.